Traditional and social media both definitely impact the way that I can search for and recognize the truth, because there are just so many sources out there, and especially with the pandemic, I feel like there are even more ways to get overwhelmed by the amount of information that is there. And obviously we've all heard a lot about fake news as well, and like the rabbit hole of Facebook or social medias where where it's kind of programmed just to show you things that you'd be interested in. So perhaps it'll show you news articles that you're interested in, and that doesn't necessarily show the whole picture, and it just shows a certain subjective perspective on one thing, and that's not necessarily the truth. So sometimes I think it's really hard to actually investigate the truth and also recognize it when it is truth, because there are so many obstacles in front of us. But I think that we can definitely support each other in this, and just by having more conversations, I think is when you can get to the truth. Because when something is written down, or when you're just reading a lot of articles on social media or something, you're not checking that with anybody, and somebody might be reading something completely different from you, especially if it's on social media, and it might not be a reliable source.
So any news that's funded by advertising is something you kind of have to think twice about, because at the end of the day, it is a business, right? For example, like, people enjoy BBC, or they like BBC because they pay a listener TV license fee to fund BBC. It's not funded by some other business. And BBC make their own talk shows and all that, right? Companies that are funded by, or news channels that are funded by big businesses, have to glamorize their news, because if they don't glamorize their news, then they don't interest the audience. And every TV channel and social media is driven by an audience, so they need to make sure that the content targets all of the audience to keep them engaged. And it's difficult to give normal news, because normal news, it can't be interesting. If you just take some average news, it's uninteresting. So they need to kind of give the news in a way that sounds almost like a Netflix show. They need to make a narrative, they need to have a cliffhanger, they need to find a way to get the viewers hooked onto whatever their news is. And I personally think it's very difficult to be 100% sure if you're looking at the right news. But I would say look at loads of different sources to get different perspectives.
I think the idea of truth is just very interesting in the first place, really, because truth is something that we all share, we all need truth, and it's something that in needing that truth and in needing to understand this reality that we share, although we might see it from different perspectives and from a diversity of sort of social realities or cultural realities, truth is something that brings us more freedom, and it brings us a greater sense of purpose, I think. So in order to investigate the truth that we see in media or in social media, it's not just the responsibility of journalists or kind of news industry to present the truth, but it's also the lens that we choose to see it, and understanding that truth isn't just going to be fixed, that at all times, if we're investigating it, we need this attitude of humility, so that when we get a different dimension to the picture, or when new understandings emerge, we're able to kind of compare that to what we thought was truth. Not in a way that means we question our integrity, but in a way that allows us to progress and to advance, because that truth will mirror our reality, and we need to be able to change our reality constructively.
I think that
the concept of truth is a contingent one. So like my truth and somebody else's truth could be different, but that one doesn't necessarily undermine the other. I think that truth is rooted in so many different things like perspective, context. People can kind of witness and experience one element of an event and report on that. And they can like miss out on the context or like the wider picture. And that doesn't necessarily say that that's a skewed version of the truth. That's just one version of the truth. So I feel like social media is just kind of like a melting pot for different truths, if that makes sense. It's just a bunch of different perspectives. It'll always inherently be a biased thing. Sorry, I meant social and traditional media. The media as a whole is inherently biased. And that's just something that I don't think we can really overcome. It's part of the nature of it. And I guess it's our job as readers not to have selective bias when observing the media. And how it affects people and wider society. I definitely think that it has a really potent effect, and that's pretty undebatable. Like the BLM movement, and how big that was in terms of influencing people and getting people on board with it and raising awareness, and potentially even influencing the outcome of the US elections. I think a lot of that was attributed to the media.
When talking about social media and the effect it has on people, I believe it's crucial to realize the problem, which is the problem of misinformation. In our modern world, it is so easy to get distracted from what is right and what is wrong, and there's this social condition, like a crime, which we must constantly watch out for, monitor, and adjust. Around 64% of adults believe in fake news, which that study in itself shows that our brains are not wired to contend with the pace of technological change. So there are those information wars, which are weaponized narratives and false content, which are magnified by social media. So I think that how can we counteract it? The solution lies in the hands of collaboration between people, and the public must start funding and supporting the production of objective, accurate information while elevating information literacy as the primary goal to education. So we should shift our focus from quantity and the possession of infinite amount of data to quality data, and that really leads us to the idea of decentralizing financially. They are decentralizing it financially, and really shifting the focus of social media platforms.
Social media, I guess, which is the media I interact with more, between the two, is something that enables me to investigate certain questions that I have and keeps me up to date with things that are happening in general around the world, and that also contributes to my understanding of reality, or just at least of facts and like what's going on. But I oftentimes find that I have to think twice before I get easily influenced by something. I think if I'm not careful, I'll read something, and whether consciously or not, I might just register it as truth, especially if I'm feeling in a certain mood, or just maybe just not paying attention. I'm just scrolling and just reading through. If I'm not being conscious, then I might just register it as truth, and maybe that will have an impact in some ways. But in a way, it's actually nice that social media is putting in practice and testing our ability to discern truth from falsehood. So, just being conscious is helpful with trying to, when investigating through media. I guess one thing that's helpful is also to remember that as humans, we're all aiming to investigate the truth and behind everything we see also or read online on social media, there's a human also who's posted it, or a group of humans. So I guess part of investigation is to also see beyond just what is seen on the surface and be able to understand journeys behind what we see. So from what point something we read is coming from, and what is inspired that, like whatever, like the journey behind whatever we see, what has inspired that. And I guess that also helps with an investigation in general. But of course, if I were to do this with every single thing I saw, then my brain would probably go numb. But keeping this on the back of my mind is actually quite helpful. And I guess doing that has small impacts, even just small things. Like I might not like something immediately. I'm talking about specific social medias, but I might not like something immediately or share it with my friends and family immediately until I've looked further into the source of the post and things like that. So in that way, it's actually quite helpful to just keep that in the back of my mind. And I think also social media is a great space to be able to see our ability for the investigation of truth, because it's actually quite putting that into practice. So it's a nice space, but it's always helpful to remember that we're not protected from social media's ability to also paralyze us in our thoughts, especially if, like, there's so many sources, there's so much information. So just to not feel overwhelmed or paralyzed by that, and maybe that idea of discerning truth from falsehood then becomes a big question. Like when we hear statements like "I will make my own truth," it becomes quite hard and to play, because we're constantly affected in indirect ways by social media. So being able to identify solid foundational ideals helps with investigation of truth, I think. So like, I don't know, I guess just having like this foundation is helpful when we're trying to investigate through social media. Like for example, if I don't have in my mind a foundation that humanity is created to be united, or the humanity needs to unite, then I will probably see a lot of truth in a lot of hateful posts, because if we just look at it from one perspective, there's actually a lot of validity around posts that like promote like this idea of separation. So I mean, like it's probably based off something, but actually to be able to not be impacted in our way of then removing this idea that actually we need to work for unity, then maybe having that foundation is helpful. I don't know if that makes sense, but then in that way, I guess we don't get affected as much by like hateful messages or like hateful posts. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe just as an example, like how a foundation also helps to then investigate for truth. So but then also once we also have a foundation, then that also helps us to see truth in such situations from different perspectives. So then being able to understand these perspectives is really important, I guess, in trying to navigate through social media without feeling this feeling of overwhelmness that there's so many perspectives and stuff. So but being able to navigate through that, I guess, is also helpful. And I guess also over time, as our investigation increases, like not just through social media. I mean, social media, I guess, also contributes to that investigation. Our fundamental understandings are also not super static. Like our understanding of that increases as well, as to the implications. And I guess social media helps to broaden our horizons, but it also has, I guess, equally that ability to make it harder at times if we aren't very conscious in the way we're using it, because it does actually impact a lot of the ways we think, ways we speak, and the way we act. So just to be aware of that, I guess, is helpful.